Hey guys, tonight we dive into the delightfully grim reality of monastic life, specifically what it was like to be absolutely crawling with fleas in a medieval monastery. Picture this: stone walls, sweating with cold, straw-stuffed mattresses that scratch more than they cushion, and the itchy crawl of unseen creatures hitching a ride on your robes. You're about to spend a full day in itchy, prayer-filled misery. Spoiler alert, you probably won't survive this without losing your patience, your hair, or your dignity. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me, where are you listening from, and what time is it in your part of the world? Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake just before dawn to the clang of the monastery's bell tower, that deep bronze ring echoing across the cloisters like a divine alarm clock with no snooze option. Your eyes open to dim candlelight flickering against stone walls. Around you, dozens of your fellow monks are already stirring in the communal dormitory, some coughing, some snoring, all scratching. You feel it before you even move. That familiar tickle on your ankle. Then one on your wrist. You swat half asleep, but it's no use. Fleas. Again. Or more accurately still. The mattress, really just a bag of straw, offers zero protection. In fact, it's part of the problem. The straw is old, possibly moldy, definitely flea-infested. You stretch, and immediately regret it. The rough wool of your habit rubs against inflamed bites on your back. Ah yes. The holy wardrobe, coarse, heavy, impossible to wash properly, more than a few times a year. Perfect for trapping warmth, humidity, and thousands of tiny insects. You sit up feeling like a walking buffet and glance around. Brother Anselm is furiously scratching behind his knee while whispering a half-hearted psalm. Brother Matthias is dabbing vinegar behind his ears again, with zero results. There's even a whispered joke among the younger novices that the fleas here are so devout, they take communion. But there's no time to wallow. The rule of Saint Benedict allows no room for complaining or oversleeping. The bell signals matins, the first of 7 daily prayer services, and you drag yourself to your feet, fleas and all. The chapel is chilly, the stone floor numbing your toes through threadbare sandals. You kneel, you rise, you chant. The voices of your brothers echo in solemn Latin harmony, rising like incense. It's beautiful, almost transcendent, until you notice the sensation of one flea crawling steadily up the inside of your thigh. You try to ignore it. You fail. By the time prayers end, you've scratched yourself raw in 3 places, and suspect one of your eyebrows is now home to at least a small flea village. Some historians believe medieval monks saw fleas as a kind of spiritual test, unwanted, but tolerated like sin poverty or Brother Alaric's breath. Others argue that the reality was far more practical. Soap was rare, laundering robes was a team sport, and fleas were simply too common to bother fighting. Outside the chapel, the sun is finally cresting the stone walls, warming the courtyard, just enough to see your breath evaporate as you step into the open. A few monks beat their robes against the stone, a desperate morning ritual that sends up tiny clouds of dust and probably makes the fleas laugh. You try it too, slapping your sleeves against the wall. 3 fleas bounce off. Victory. Or maybe just temporary eviction. And so your day begins. The sun rises grudgingly, casting long golden slats through the arched cloister windows. You're already sweeping the stone walkway, broom in hand, though you might as well be using a toothpick against the layer of medieval filth caked into every corner. The chill air still bites at your fingers, but under your robe, your skin is heating up again. The fleas are wide awake. The monastery's silence is a living thing. Aside from the soft shuffling of feet and the faint clatter of buckets and tools, you work in near total quiet. Not for lack of things to say, but because the Benedictine rule demands it. Ora et labora, pray and work, and suffer in silence, apparently. You drag the stiff broom along stirring dust hay scraps, and what you swear is a dead beetle. But honestly, it's hard to focus on anything with the familiar prickle crawling up your calf. One quick scratch, discreet under your robe, turns into a brief full-body squirm. A gnat lands on your nose. You sneeze. Brother Hugo glances at you like you've just interrupted the Last Supper. Outwardly, you return to sweeping. Inwardly, you're planning flea-based revenge fantasies that involve boiling cauldrons and sulfur. Your next task is weeding the garden, which sounds peaceful until you realize you're crawling around in soil where fleas thrive. Every time your sleeve brushes the ground, you feel a little hop. Maybe it's your imagination, or maybe the fleas have evolved. You'd honestly believe it by now. Interestingly, scholars today debate whether medieval people truly understood how fleas contributed to disease. Some evidence suggests they knew fleas were a problem. There are records of monks soaking robes in vinegar or hanging them over smoke. Others argue that since the connection between fleas and plague wasn't firmly established until much later, most monks probably thought the itching was just divine testing, or maybe punishment for impure thoughts during last night's complaint. As the sun climbs higher, your duties shift to candle making. This involves melting fat and dipping wicks, but also standing next to a bubbling pot that smells like a sheep died in it 3 days ago. The heat is unbearable. Fleas hate heat, right? You hope so, but no one just crawled into your sleeve and bit you right on the forearm. Brother Cedric across from you is covered in visible red welts. He looks like a walking map of minor martyrdom. His only commentary is a muttered, "The Lord doth try us," while he scratches a line down his neck with the back of a spoon. He's been banned from using forks since last week's unfortunate nose incident. You wonder not for the first time how the saints did this without snapping. Saint Bernard wrote about the virtue of enduring bodily discomfort with patience, which is the medieval way of saying, suck it up. But you can't help thinking that if Bernard had lived in this monastery, he might have added a footnote about insecticide. After candle duty, you're sent to help in the cloister library, passing under faded murals of angels who've somehow managed to look smug. The stillness there is eerie books' parchment knowledge. And fleas. Fleas love parchment. At least one scholar has proposed that fleas may have even been partially responsible for the loss of some medieval texts, nibbling on vellum, like buffet hors d'oeuvres. You try to focus on your sweeping again, but it's hard with your inner thighs burning and your wrists erupting in fresh red spots. A flea jumps visibly from your habit to the floor. You mutter a prayer, possibly a curse. Honestly, it's hard to tell the difference at this point. By midday, your whole body is a constellation of bites and twitches. You think about the long road ahead, prayer, more chores, then lunch. You've earned every bean that'll be on your plate, assuming the fleas don't eat first. You shuffle into the scriptorium, trailing straw from your habit, and scratching your neck with the edge of your sleeve. Inside, the air is thick with candle smoke and dust. The windows are narrow slits, letting in just enough light to work without completely banishing the shadows. Rows of hunched monks already sit at long wooden desks, silently copying Latin texts onto vellum. You take your usual seat third from the end, next to Brother Giles, who has been sneezing every 5 minutes since Lent. You dip your quill into the inkpot, hands shaking ever so slightly from the cold, or the bites. Hard to say at this point. The scriptorium is sacred work. You're not just transcribing, you're preserving the word. The Psalms. Augustine. That one herbal manual someone smuggled in from Italy. It's supposed to be a deeply meditative experience, but meditation is nearly impossible when your scalp feels like a petting zoo. You press your head against your shoulder to scratch without using your hands. That works for 2 seconds until another flea launches a full-scale assault somewhere beneath your collar. You freeze trying to keep your posture, but your eyes are starting to water from the itching. Brother Giles leans slightly toward you and whispers, "They got my eyelid again last night." You nod, lips tight. This is normal. A monk getting bitten on the eyelid in his sleep isn't a crisis. It's a Tuesday. You go back to copying Domine exaudi orationem meam. Lord, hear my prayer. Preferably the one about flea extinction. There's a strange comfort in the rhythm of it. Dip, scratch, right. Dip, scratch, right. But then you catch a movement out of the corner of your eye. A flea, just strolling across your parchment like it owns the place. You flick it. It jumps into the air and lands somewhere, probably in your hood. Some historians still argue whether the monastic scribes truly endured these conditions without complaint, or whether much of the silence was sheer survival instinct. After all, complaining about fleas doesn't make them go away, and if you talked too much, you might end up with extra penance. Or worse, be reassigned to latrine duty. Again. Speaking of which, Brother Hugh, 2 desks down, has started quietly whimpering. Not from pain, but from the sheer frustration of it. His face is blotchy, his wrists red, his tonsure twitching. You know that look. He's about to break his vow of silence with a creative use of the word vermin. You keep your head down and your eyes on the parchment. Keep working. Every smudge is a sin. Every bite is a reminder that holiness isn't glamorous. It's itchy, smelly, and crawling. Somewhere behind you, a flea bites the back of your knee, and you let out a barely audible It's less a word, and more a sound of existential despair. You wonder if saints got fleas. Did St. Anthony of the Desert scratch his legs raw under his robe? Did St. Clare ever burn her sheets in protest? No one ever painted the flea-infested martyrdom of St. Jerome, but you suspect it would have been a bestseller in this place. By the 4th hour in the scriptorium, you're no longer copying psalms, you're just surviving them. Brother Giles sneezes again, smearing ink across his page. He doesn't even wipe it. He just scratches the top of his head with a long wooden spoon he keeps in his sleeve. Honestly, he might be onto something. And yet, despite it all, the monks keep working. The room smells of beeswax musty wool and the faint bitterness of unwashed skin. Somewhere a mouse skitters. The fleas, meanwhile, reign supreme. The bell tolls for the midday meal, and you put your quill down, flexing fingers stiff from cold and pestilence. You stand only to realize the fleas have not only survived the scriptorium, they've multiplied. As you walk toward the refectory, you catch your reflection in a polished brass basin. You look tired, pale, and slightly twitchy. But the words you wrote today will live for centuries. Too bad you probably won't make it past dinner. The refectory is dim, drafty, and smells like every meal you've ever eaten here, and all the ones you wish you hadn't. Lentils over boiled onions, maybe a turnip or two, and that ever-present scent of damp wool mixed with unidentifiable foot. You sit on the hard bench robes sticking slightly to your thighs, and try not to shift too much. The fleas love movement. They think it's an invitation. Your meal is simple. Bread so hard you could chip a tooth. Pottage with mysterious brown lumps. And a weak ale that tastes like someone described beer to a bucket of rainwater. You're supposed to eat in silence, listening as one monk reads aloud from scripture at the pulpit. Today's selection is from the Book of Job, which feels appropriate since your entire lower half is basically a biblical trial. You break your bread and wait. No, that's not a crumb. That's a flea. It's just landed. It stares at you boldly like it owns this meal. You flick it off, trying not to disrupt the sacred silence. It bounces off your sleeve and lands on Brother Simon's collar. You don't say anything. He's probably already hosting dozens anyway. The dining hall is cold, but the warmth of so many bodies gathered in one place creates a strange fog. Fleas love it. You try to eat quickly, but without chewing too loud. Your tongue finds a swollen bite inside your lip. How did it get there? You pause to scratch your shin discreetly with the heel of your other foot, but now the itching spreads up your side behind your ear and oh, come on, not the armpit again. Not the monk reading aloud seems perfectly still. You wonder if he's immune. Maybe he's been here so long the fleas consider him sacred. Then you notice his left foot tapping slightly. Even the holy itch. There's a story whispered in the dormitory, probably apocryphal, but it circulates. About a monk centuries ago who had fleas so bad he snapped, shaved his head, his arms, even his eyebrows. Covered himself in vinegar and ashes and declared war on the infernal jumping spawn. He was transferred to a hermitage and later canonized for his spiritual fervor. You suspect he was just incredibly itchy. You spoon up your last bit of pottage and find, surprise, a stray flea doing the backstroke. You push the bowl away. This apparently is the monastic diet, minimal penitential and protein-enriched, unintentionally. Historians have noted that medieval monasteries were often cleaner than most peasant homes, but that's a low bar. While monks did have rules for bathing monthly if you were lucky, weekly if you were infirm, it did little to deter the flea population. Soap was handmade, rare, and smelled like despair. Flea combs existed, but sharing them was, let's say, frowned upon. For obvious reasons. One fringe theory suggests that some monks actually valued the fleas, not for companionship, but for mortification. Just as some saints wore hair shirts to irritate their skin and resist vanity fleas, were considered a kind of living discipline. A reminder that even in quiet devotion, you were never truly in control, not even of your own body. You try to imagine yourself as a holy vessel enduring suffering for the glory of God. Then a flea bites your knuckle, and you nearly slam your hand on the table. The meal ends. A bell tolls. Everyone rises in unison, robes rustling like wings of a dusty flock. As you file out of the refectory, you catch a whispered comment from Brother Peter behind you. Today's stew bit back. You don't laugh, but inside your soul lets out a single exhausted chuckle. Back outside, the sun has passed its peak. The wind is back colder now. You rub your arms through your sleeves and feel little bumps, new welts forming. You sigh. There's still the afternoon ahead. More prayer, more cleaning, more itching. You pause by the herb garden and yank a sprig of pennyroyal. You crush it between your fingers and smear the oil behind your ears. It stings. It smells like crushed mint and broken dreams. You know it won't work, but it's something. A ritual. A little defiance against your tiny six-legged tormentors. And then it's time to return to your chores. You're back in the courtyard now, scrubbing a brass basin with cold water that's turned your hands a noble shade of violet. Fleas aren't the only thing biting your fingers, feel like they're about to snap off. But as you swirl the cloth around the rim of the bowl, you feel the telltale tickle behind your knee again. You sigh deeply. This time you don't scratch. You just let it crawl. You're conserving energy now, like a ship slowly taking on water, but with dignity. Brother Marcus approaches with a small sack of crushed herbs, lavender, wormwood, and rue. He gives you a solemn nod, as if handing over the relics of a saint. For the fleas, he mutters. You blink. He's being serious. You take the sack, and thank him as reverently as possible, then shove it under your robe like contraband. Rubbing crushed wormwood behind your ears becomes your afternoon project. The scent is bitter and green, and vaguely like someone spilled soup in a graveyard. According to a curious medical text, one of the older monks swears by wormwood deters all manner of pests. Of course, that same text also recommends wearing a dead toad in a linen bag around your neck. You haven't tried that one. Yet. You pass Brother Conrad in the corridor. He's dabbing goose fat onto his wrists like it's perfume. The fleas slide right off, he explains. He winks. You're not sure if it works or if he's just extremely slippery now. Historians still argue whether these homemade remedies had any real effect, or were simply ritualistic coping mechanisms, distractions, basically. Some suggest monks used sweet-smelling herbs to mask the stench of unwashed bodies and stale cloisters, not necessarily for the fleas. Others believe flea prevention was an ongoing battle of trial error and increasingly bizarre ideas. And it's not like the monks didn't try. Bedding was occasionally aired out. Habits were shaken, beaten, and sometimes boiled. But with communal sleeping quarters, livestock nearby, and wool robes worn for weeks, sometimes months at a time, fleas weren't guests. They were tenants. You've heard talk of an old remedy hidden in the cellar, a mixture of vinegar ashes and lard. Brother Thomas claims it worked for exactly 4 hours, once then gave him a rash, worse than the fleas. He still walks like he's got porcupines in his trousers. You sneak into the chapel briefly, just to sit still and breathe. Your back finds the coolness of a stone pillar, and for a moment you don't itch. Maybe the fleas are praying too. Then one bites your ankle, hard, You whisper a tiny Lord Why and slap your foot discreetly. The bell rings for nun afternoon prayer. You rise, legs stiff, skin humming. In the chapel, everyone looks like they're melting. No one moves more than absolutely necessary. Brother Hugo scratches the side of his nose with the edge of his psalter. Brother Matthias has given up entirely and is gently rocking back and forth like a traumatized shepherd. You kneel. The stone is cold, but at least the fleas don't like it. You bow your head and try to focus. Deus in adjutorium meum intend. God, come to my assistance. Indeed, even as you pray, your fingers twitch against your robe. You feel them crawling on your hip, on your lower back. One brave soul ventures up your neck past your jawline. You clench your jaw and keep chanting. This is what monks don't mention in their writings, the part where spirituality meets constant tiny torment. The part where sainthood feels suspiciously like having ants in your underwear 24/7. But you endure. That's the whole point, isn't it? After prayer, you join the others in the corridor again, the air thick with incense and sweat, and centuries of resignation. Fleas hop from robe to robe like pilgrims on their own sacred journey. Brother Marcus catches your eye and shrugs. Blessed are the meek, he says. You nod, especially the itchy. You're hauling a sloshing chamber pot down a narrow hallway that smells exactly like you'd expect. The contents slop threateningly close to the rim with each step. Your arms are sore, your back is aching, and the fleas are still feasting on you like it's their divine right. This is what humility smells like. You pass Brother Raymond, who gives you a sympathetic grimace. He's got a red blotch on his cheek in the unmistakable shape of a bite. They got me during vigils, he mutters, scratching under his tonsure. Right in the scalp. I think they've nested in my hair. You can't even laugh. Your own tonsure's crawling too. Yesterday you caught 3 fleas in your prayer book. They were just sitting there like they were waiting for confession. As you empty the pot into the latrine trench, holding your breath and soul, Brother Hugo appears with news. Brother Thomas shaved his legs. You blink. What? Used a kitchen knife. Said it was either that or set himself on fire. That checks out. You've seen Brother Thomas lately. He's been doing the monk equivalent of speed walking, constantly twitching. The story spreads fast. Within the hour, whispers about Thomas's defiance echo off the cloister walls like psalms of rebellion. Some monks approve. Others fear he's breached the holy bounds of bodily modesty. Historians still debate how common that kind of grooming was. Some sources suggest monks shaved to discourage lice and fleas. Others claim that bodily hair removal was frowned upon as vanity. Whatever the case, Thomas is probably hiding in the cellar, smooth as a candle. You return to the corridor, rubbing your arm, where a bite has begun to swell. You suspect you're developing flea-based welts in the shape of medieval punctuation marks. The irony is poetic. Brother Leon is mopping the entryway, muttering prayers under his breath and swatting at the back of his habit. You ask him how he's holding up. I stopped feeling anything below the knees 3 days ago, he replies. It's either grace or nerve damage. Later in the laundry alcove, you help hang damp habits on ropes that sag with mildew. You beat your robe against the stone wall like it insulted your mother. Fleas spring out like sparks. You count 6, maybe 7. That's a good haul. You turn to Brother Simon, who's wearing what looks like a necklace of dried marigolds. What's that for? Protection, he says solemnly. I read it in a bestiary, or maybe dreamt it. Doesn't matter. Monks have started getting creative. Someone strung garlic along the dormitory windows. Another lined his sleeping mat with pine needles. You're honestly tempted to try that one, except the pine needles come from the Abbey Cemetery, and that just feels like inviting ghosts. You stop to rest on a bench in the cloister garden. A lone sparrow chirps from the roof as the breeze rustles the rosemary. For one moment, all is still. All is calm. Then, without ceremony, a flea walks across your hand. Bold as brass. You flick it. It lands in your lap. You slap your lap. Brother Felix sees you and nods approvingly. You exchange glances that say, "We are all hosts now." A sudden thought crosses your mind. What if there are more fleas in this monastery than monks? The math checks out. There are 50 of you. And based on how often you're bitten, each of you might be home to, 1,000. You stop yourself. This is not a road you want to walk down. You overhear someone telling a tale from another abbey. A monk there supposedly wore linen soaked in nettle juice and never got bitten again. He also died young, the storyteller adds cheerfully. So maybe there's a connection. You laugh a little too hard. The kind of laugh that says, I haven't had a full night's sleep in weeks, and my kneecaps itch. The day is winding down, but the fleas are just warming up. You can feel them organizing shifts. They've probably got their own monastic order by now, the Brothers of Perpetual Biting. You pull your hood forward and mutter a prayer not found in any official liturgy. Dear Lord, grant me the strength to endure what cannot be scratched. Compline, the final prayer of the day. You shuffle into the chapel with the others, feet aching, thighs aflame, skin blotchy and hot beneath your robe. The air is heavy with incense, frankincense maybe, and something deeper, something you've come to recognize as the shared exhaustion of 50 men, barely hanging on to the concept of patience by a fraying thread. You kneel slowly, carefully. Every movement is deliberate now, not for reverence, but because sudden shifts make the fleas go berserk. One jerky motion and it's like setting off an internal firework display, except the explosions are all itch-based. The stone floor presses against your knees. You lower your head. The chant begins. Soft Latin syllables drift upward into the vaulted ceiling. It should be peaceful, but your skin is alive, twitching with the constant awareness of movement. You don't even feel the bites anymore, just a general sensation of wrongness. Like you're being whispered to by 1,000 mouths you'll never see. You consider it a personal victory when you make it halfway through the Psalms without scratching. Then a rogue flea makes a bold run across your cheek. You slap it. The echo in the chapel is loud. A few monks glance over. You nod solemnly as if it were a spontaneous act of divine zeal. You try to refocus. In manus tuas Domine commendo spiritum meum. Into your hands, O Lord, I commend my spirit. Preferably without fleas, if possible. Historians still argue whether monks genuinely believed flea infestations were a divine form of purification. Some claim the suffering was embraced part of the long tradition of ascetic mortification. Others suspect most monks just suffered silently because complaining wouldn't do any good, and besides, scratching during prayer was definitely not considered devout behavior. There's even a fringe theory that some monasteries saw fleas as a kind of unspoken spiritual companion. After all, they were always there, more reliable than the weather, more faithful than the abbot's memory. Maybe in some odd way, they were part of monastic identity, like tonsures, or sandals, or digestive troubles after lentils. The final candle is snuffed. Compline ends. You rise with the others, but slower this time. Your joints creak. Your robe sticks. You think one of your ankles might be bleeding. You wonder not for the first time if this was what sainthood feels like, not radiant glory, but a low-grade constant sensation of wanting to scream into a hay bale. In the dormitory, the day's battle continues. You shake out your blanket. Fleas scatter. You dust the straw mattress with rosemary ash. Useless, but ritual helps. Like tucking yourself in before the executioner arrives. Brother Hugo is muttering to himself. They don't sleep, you know. They wait. You believe him. A few monks apply vinegar to their legs. A couple more sit cross-legged in the corner, eyes closed, whispering something between prayer and personal crisis. And there's Brother Thomas, freshly shaved and radiant in the moonlight. No bites today, he announces smugly, lying down on his bed like a triumphant gladiator. Someone throws a sandal at him. You're not sure who, but it was well aimed. You climb into your blanket, careful not to jostle too much. Your scalp itches. So does your elbow. One final flea crawls across your neck and you let it go. It's too late. You've made peace with the swarm. You are one with the itch. You close your eyes and think of the saints, the martyrs, the wise old desert fathers who lived on nothing but faith and sand. Surely they endured worse. Probably. You try to focus on your breathing. In, out. Ignore the twitch. Ignore the tickle. Ignore the deep spiritual need to remove your entire robe and run screaming into the river. Maybe tomorrow will be better. Maybe the flea population will dwindle. Maybe Brother Thomas will fall into a nettle bush and you'll get his mattress. For now, you whisper your final thought of the day into the darkness. Please, Lord, just let me sleep through the next bite. And then the night begins. Sleep doesn't come quickly. Not here. Not ever. The dormitory is still, but the silence is deceptive. Beneath it lies a quiet symphony of scratching, sighing, and the occasional soft slap of someone swatting their own leg in the dark. It's a strange kind of music, rhythmic, pathetic, intimate. You lie curled under your coarse blanket, the straw mattress poking into your side through the thin wool of your robe. The fleas are relentless. You can feel them moving, skittering along your ribs, dancing around your waistline, nibbling at the arch of your foot. One makes it into your sleeve. You don't even react anymore. You just sigh. Above you, Brother Felix murmurs in his sleep, "No more turnips, please." Across the room, someone mutters what sounds like a prayer, or possibly a confession about cheese theft. But mostly there's only the sound of skin being scratched raw. There's something uniquely medieval about lying in bed while parasites crawl all over you, and your only comfort is the knowledge that everyone else is suffering equally. Communal torment, truly the great equalizer. You shift position carefully. Your knee brushes against something soft, a flea bag. Yours, full of dried lavender and crushed rue. It hasn't helped, not even a little, but you cling to it anyway, like a holy relic, or an emotional support satchel. At some point you manage to drift off, but it's not restful. Your dreams are strange, a surreal blend of flickering candlelight chanting in endless loops and fields made of fleas instead of grass. You try to run, but your robe is too heavy, and someone keeps reading psalms over your shoulder. You wake twice, once to scratch your collarbone, once to beat your pillow like it owes you money. And then, hours later, as the first thin thread of morning light creeps through the cracks in the shuttered windows, the bell tolls again. A single deep clang that vibrates through the stone walls and into your aching bones. You open your eyes. Your robe is damp with sweat. Your ankles are raw. One of your fingers has a bite that's begun to blister. Another day begins, and still the fleas remain. Some historians theorize that the monks may have developed a kind of mental resilience to cope with this relentless discomfort. Maybe it was faith. Maybe it was numbness. Maybe they just adapted, became part of the cycle. Bitten, itching, praying, chanting. Repeat. There's an argument to be made that this was a form of spiritual transcendence when your body is under constant assault. Maybe your soul learns to detach, float upward, rise beyond the flesh and its miserable crawlies. Or maybe it's just that you're too tired to care anymore. You sit up slowly. Across the room, Brother Hugo is already standing, rubbing rosemary oil on his wrists and mumbling something about becoming unpalatable. You pull on your sandals and rise to join the others. As you file out for matins, scratching quietly and blinking in the candlelight, you wonder what modern people would think of this life. The silence, the cold, the vermin. But you also think of the strange comfort in the rhythm of it all. The simplicity, the shared burden, the quiet faith that despite everything, the bites, the rashes, the complete lack of flea control each day, brings some small kind of grace, even if that grace comes wrapped in wool and scratching itself raw. And so you walk forward into another day, scratching your side with a sigh and humming the first lines of Psalm 143 under your breath. Hear my prayer, O Lord, give ear to my supplications. And now, as we ease back from the scratchy stone corridors of medieval monastic life, let your mind drift away from the flickering candlelight and echoing prayers. The fleas, persistent little devils that they were, fade with the memories of cold stone and coarse robes. You're no longer lying on a bed of straw, twitching at every phantom tickle. You're in your own space now. Safe. Still. Let your breath slow your thoughts quiet, and your limbs settle deep into comfort. Whatever discomforts or little annoyances today brought you, They were surely less itchy than flea-infested wool. Let that strange comfort carry you. The bells won't toll for you tonight. No one expects you to rise before dawn. No one is biting your ankles. You are calm. You are warm. You are utterly blessedly alone. And in this stillness, sleep is finally welcome. Sweet dreams. Hey guys, tonight we're slipping into a pair of worn leather clogs, ducking under low stone archways, and entering a world that smells of burnt onion boiled entrails and desperation. That's right. We're spending one full, utterly chaotic day in a medieval banquet kitchen. It's not glamorous. It's not clean. And spoiler alert, you probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. I want to know if you're also awake at 2 a.m., imagining the smell of rancid goose fat. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up before the sun dares to stretch across the horizon. It's cold dark, and you're already sneezing, probably from the mildew crawling along the inside of your shared servants' quarters. Your feet hit the floor, which is less floor, and more compressed mud seasoned with ash and occasional rat droppings. Breakfast. Not happening. You have approximately 30 seconds to splash your face with icy water and get to the scullery before someone flings a ladle at your head. The kitchen is already alive, or more accurately, it's wheezing, belching, and groaning like a dragon with indigestion. Smoke curls out of 3 hearths, and the scullion beside you is hacking up last night's lungful of soot. You're immediately put on inspection duty, which is a polite way of saying, smell this meat, and tell us if it'll kill a nobleman. You poke at a slab of venison that's been aging in a wooden trough for... honestly, no one's sure. There's a layer of fuzz along the edge, but the kitchen master shrugs. Scrape it off, he says. It'll stew just fine. Historians still argue whether medieval cooks truly believed that boiling something for long enough killed all ills, or if they just didn't care. The prep area is a horror show of sensory assault. Blood from yesterday's goose slaughters still stains the stone. There's a stack of onions taller than you, and the cook says if you peel them too slowly, they'll be tossed at your head. With force. Meanwhile, rodents scurry across your boots like they pay rent here. One particularly bold rat stares you down as you try to shoo it away from the pantry. You lose the staring contest. He probably has a name and a higher rank than you. Still, there's structure, sort of. Everyone has a role. You, for instance, are lower scullion first tier, which is a fancy way of saying you get to clean things, carry heavy stuff, and if someone vomits, it's your problem. One of your early tasks is sorting the fresh produce. The carrots are bendy. The leeks are suspicious. The apples. Mostly fine if you cut around the brown. Medieval kitchens operated on the idea that presentation could hide a multitude of sins. A sprinkle of spices, a dash of vinegar, a big splash of denial. Still, there's a certain brutal poetry to it all. The clang of cleavers, the hiss of meat hitting hot iron, the rhythmic thump of bread dough being pounded into submission. If you weren't dodging chicken bones and trying not to step in pig bile, it might almost be elegant. But you're sweating already, and it's not even mid-morning. You take a moment to wipe your brow on your sleeve and immediately regret it. There was lard on your sleeve. Now it's on your face. Congratulations. You smell like a tallow candle and regret. Someone yells your name. Or, well, the name they gave you, because in here no one bothers remembering what you were actually called. Oi, turnspit's broken again. Hope your arms work. You glance at the spit. A side of beef the size of your torso is already turning brown over a crackling fire. The iron rod is steaming. Smoke curls upward like incense offered to the god of blistered fingers, and suddenly your day is about to get much, much worse. The spit roasts are already turning when you trudge over, but not by any miracle of automation. This isn't some storybook kitchen with enchanted utensils. No, it's you, or rather the poor soul assigned as the turnspit who keeps the great hunk of meat, rotating evenly one sweaty rotation at a time. Today that soul is you. There's a wooden wheel, half a dog-sized hamster contraption mounted beside the hearth. You're expected to climb in and walk like a condemned gerbil for hours. That's the luxury version. Today, it's jammed, so you're doing it by hand, your palms slick with grease, gripping the iron rod, while fire roars just inches from your eyebrows. Historians still argue whether turnspit dogs were common in every noble kitchen, or if most poor households just conscripted the nearest orphan. Either way, you're beginning to suspect you've drawn the short straw in both time and place. The heat is unholy. Your shins sting from flying sparks. The skin on your knuckles is beginning to crisp. The scent of sizzling meat might seem delicious in theory, but after 10 minutes of breathing it in alongside wood smoke, you're coughing like a chimney sweep and wondering if internal organs can actually melt. No one helps you. The head cook walks by and tosses a handful of rosemary at your feet, like it's some kind of medieval blessing. "Keep it turning, or it'll scorch," he barks. "And if it scorches, you'll be on the spit tomorrow." You're 80% sure he's joking. Only 80%. To distract yourself from the pain, you sneak glances around the room. There's a rhythm to the kitchen, some twisted ballet of controlled chaos. One scullion is beating eggs with what looks like a carved tree branch. Another is butchering a pheasant with a blade that's clearly also been used as a doorstop. A woman nearby is carving decorations into a molded jelly, shaped like a castle, made of veal. It jiggles ominously. It's hard not to laugh or cry. One of the two. Possibly both. You wipe your face on the same sleeve still greasy. Your eyebrows are probably singed by now. You shift your grip again, feeling the blisters rising on your palm. It smells like someone left a candle burning inside a sausage. Above you, soot from the chimney drizzles down like black snow. You hope it's soot. It's better not to look too closely. The meat turns and turns and turns. You lose track of time. Is it still morning? Has the sun moved? You could be stuck in some kind of time loop where all that exists is beef and fire. A hot, greasy purgatory. Your arms shake. Suddenly, a shout from behind you. "We're low on firewood." You groan. That's your cue. With no rest, no water, and about 6 fingers that no longer bend properly, you shuffle outside to the woodpile. Of course it's soaked. Rain 2 days ago means the logs are slimy and crawling with insects. Perfect. You shoulder a few and trudge back inside. Every step squelches with ancient spills of broth and blood. You're offered no thanks, just a slap on the back that knocks the air from your lungs. And then comes the highlight of your shift. A monk wanders in, supposedly blessing the meal. He glances at the roast, crosses himself, and mutters something in Latin. Then he tastes a piece, frowns, spits it into the fire. "Try not to burn the Lord's Supper," he says, already turning on his heel. You're too tired to be offended. You're too sweaty to care. Later, you collapse on the bench for exactly 90 seconds before being screamed at for sitting. Sitting is for nobles. You're not even allowed to lean. Your back spasms in protest. But you do sneak a glance at the roast golden and glistening fat crackling gently across the skin. It looks perfect. You won't get to eat it, of course. That's for the feast. You'll be lucky if you get leftover porridge with 1 dead fly instead of 3. Your arms are jelly. Your shirt is soaked through. You smell like someone set a candle made of bacon fat on fire and tried to put it out with ale. And now it's time to dive into fish prep. You've been reassigned from the spit, not out of mercy, but because someone puked in the fish bucket, and guess who gets to clean it? That's right. You. The fish arrive in baskets, eels, trout, and some unidentifiable things with more teeth than eyes. They're flopping. Some are dead. Some are deciding. The eel stares at you very much alive, and you realize this one's going to be personal. You grab the knife. Slippery fingers, eel slime, and a twitching body do not make a good combo. After about 15 seconds of wrestling, you manage to decapitate it barely. You're now covered in mucus, and your soul has left your body. The cook nearby laughs. "First eel," he asks. You nod. "Don't worry," he says. "You'll dream about it for weeks." There's a massive vat bubbling behind you. It smells like a mixture of seawater mushrooms and something that may once have been garlic, but has since decided to reinvent itself as a bioweapon. You're told it's a fish sauce. You suspect it's a threat to public health. Still, this is one of the more lavish kitchens. You've got spices, saffron cloves, even a pinch of cinnamon for the pike. That's the good news. The bad news is that the fish are about as fresh as your undershirt, which, considering your current state, is not a compliment. Historians still argue whether fish served at high medieval banquets was genuinely prized, or just a necessary evil during fast days. Either way, the nobility expected elaborate displays, pikes with their jaws rehung open eel pies, arranged in spirals, and seafood jellies molded into absurd shapes. One manuscript even describes a jelly made from fish bones, dyed pink with beetroot and served on a silver plate shaped like a goose. You don't have a silver plate. You barely have enough clean cloth to dry your hands, and yet the cook expects perfection. You're elbow deep in trout guts when a panicked boy rushes in. "We're out of parsley," he squeaks. The head cook, currently mid-lecture on the proper alignment of carp fins, turns purple with rage. You're sent to the garden. It's raining. You stumble through the muddy yard, slip once, and land directly in something squishy that smells like fertilizer and betrayal. You don't even check what it is. You grab what might be parsley. It could be mint or nettles or toxic nightshade. You're beyond caring and run back inside. It's not parsley. You're slapped with a wooden spoon and told to try thinking next time. You wonder if you still can. Your hands are so cold they no longer feel like hands, just pale gloves of pain. One of your nails is turning blue. You're worried about that. The kitchen boy beside you casually mentions he lost a toe last winter. "Fell off in my sock," he says cheerfully. "Didn't notice till dinner." He seems fine with it. You're not. Eventually you're assigned to the sauce station, which sounds promising, until you see it 3 bubbling pots, all spitting like angry cats. One's a mustard blend, another's some kind of thickened wine reduction, and the third, well, it smells like mustard and regret. You stir, you taste, you spill some on your foot. It burns. You say nothing. A noblewoman's steward stops by to sample the dishes. He tastes your sauce and tilts his head. "Not bad," he says, for someone who looks like they've been dunked in sewage. You beam with pride. That is the closest thing to a compliment you've received all day. Then the eel slides off the table and lands on your boot. You leave it there. Maybe it's better that way. Your knees crack when you stand. Your spine protests like a rusty gate, but there's no time to rest. A shout from across the room sends a wave of panic down your already trembling arms. The cauldrons are boiling over again. You shuffle back into the heart of the kitchen, where steam billows like dragon breath, and every surface is wet, hot, or both. The cauldron in front of you is as big as a bathtub, and smells like mutton stew left in a gym sock. You're told it's for the 3rd course. You're not even on course 1 yet. One wrong move and you'll be soup yourself. You grab the ladle, a twisted iron thing the size of a rowing oar, and begin stirring, hoping to keep the bubbling mess from escaping. It sloshes and hisses, and lets off spurts of steam hot enough to melt your eyebrows. Meanwhile, your shoes squelch from the stew someone else already spilled. The floor is basically medieval gravy. Dogs weave between your legs, 3 of them, mutts covered in crumbs and hope. They're not pets. They're pest control. And they're losing the battle. Rats skitter along the beams above. One lands in the flour barrel. No one flinches. It's Wednesday. You dodge an elbow as one of the scullery lads swings around with a sack of onions, except it tears open mid-spin, and onions rain down like an apocalyptic garnish. A spoon clatters to the ground. A sharp voice yells, "Who dropped the nutmeg?" That was imported. You duck to avoid blame. Always duck. A mainstream historical fact for you, these banquet kitchens were basically war zones. Royal kitchens in places like Westminster or the Louvre might prep over 1,000 dishes a day for a single feast. That's right, 1,000. 1 duck for the lady from Cornwall, 2 dozen lampreys for the bishop, and an entire roasted boar with a lemon in its mouth for some nobleman's fragile ego. And you're still trying not to scald your arm. Suddenly, the master cook appears. His tunic is stained with so many sauces it's become abstract art. His mood unstable at best. He barks at you to adjust the heat on the 2nd cauldron. You stare at the fire and realize there is no adjustment. It's wood. You either feed it, or you don't. You toss in another log, hoping it'll earn you favor. It doesn't. He's already yelling at someone else. This time about the spiced wine being too spiced. "Do I look like I want to drink perfume?" he roars. You blink slowly and wonder what perfume smells like. Probably better than your tunic. Amid all this, a fringe kitchen detail. Some recipes from surviving medieval cookbooks, like the Form of Cury, instruct the cook to boil until it looketh like brains. This is not an exaggeration. Today's task includes a lamb's head pottage complete with eyeballs. You're told to scoop them out delicately. You're also told not to look them in the eye. That advice arrives a few seconds too late. You're so deep in your misery that when a bucket of water spills over your boot, you don't even react. You just let it happen. The heat has reached your bones, and your soul has checked out and gone to hide behind the turnips. Then someone screams. A scullery girl has dropped a jug of honey, and it's now oozing across the table like a very slow disaster. Ants are already arriving. So are wasps. You swat one, and the cook slaps you. Don't bruise the air. You don't even know what that means. Historians still argue whether kitchen roles in noble houses were rigid or flexible. Could a boy working the pots ever rise to be a head cook? In your case, you suspect the only place you'll rise to is the roof screaming. At least the boiled cabbage doesn't scream when it hits the pot. By the time the cook's assistant tells you to go chop herbs for the pie glaze, your hands are trembling too hard to hold the knife steady. You manage a parsley pile the size of a thumbprint before someone leans on your prep board and ruins everything. And somewhere across the stone walls and kitchen, smoke a bell rings. Not for you, for them. The nobles. The ones waiting for the feast to begin. You're still boiling water and hope. You're relocated. Again. Your limbs ache like you've been hit with a rolling pin, which ironically is now your primary tool. Welcome to the bakehouse, the hottest, driest, and somehow smelliest corner of this already hellish operation. It's a standalone room tucked beside the main kitchen, though calling it a room is generous. Think brick oven. Low beams, flour-dusted air, and a heat level that could bake a tray of pies using your tears alone. The moment you step inside, a wall of heat slaps you like an insult from an in-law. The ovens are glowing red, stuffed with bread loaves, meat pies, and something called pestles, which you think are dried fruit snacks, but might also be medieval punishment food. Your task: pie crusts, all day, all night, forever maybe. You drop your flour-dusted hands into a massive basin of dough, goose fat, barley flour, and something that smells vaguely like regret. Medieval pastry wasn't the flaky, buttery delight you might expect. No, it was called a coffin. Yes, really. Because it wasn't meant to be eaten, it was just a shell to hold whatever meat got shoved inside it. The pastry coffin was thick, solid, and designed to survive transport the elements, and possibly a siege. You roll it out with a wooden pin that's seen more war than you have. It squeaks with every pass. The dough resists like it has opinions. You press the edges into the tray and try not to think about what's going inside. Probably pigeon, or eel, or minced squirrel. Whatever it is, it's been sweating on the counter for an hour. A mainstream historical fact: medieval banquets didn't just serve food, they displayed it. Dishes were decorated with gold leaf-painted crusts and shapes that mimicked castles or mythological beasts. You glance over at one of the show pies. It's supposed to look like a swan. It looks like a bread tumor. Suddenly, a shout fires out. A scramble erupts as the apprentice baker realizes he's let the oven cool too much. In the bakehouse, that's a disaster. Ovens took hours to heat. They were stone, and once they lost temperature, good luck getting it back before the feast. The master baker kicks a stool, then blames the humidity, then blames the flour, then blames you somehow. You nod. Sure, why not? Sweat drips into your dough. You're too tired to care. You use your sleeve to wipe your face, but your sleeve is mostly butter at this point. So now you're just greasier. A fringe tidbit to spice up your misery. Some medieval recipes called for live birds to be sealed into pies. Not cooked. Live. So when nobles cut into them, the birds flew out in a flurry of feathers. You hear rumors that the head baker once tried that trick for a baron's birthday feast, but the birds had a panic attack and exploded into a cheese platter. Historians still argue whether those animal-filled pies were actually common, or just a few extravagant stunts in court records, the flour-dusted girl beside you mutters. You don't even ask how she knows that. You're hallucinating too hard to care. Your arms are coated in flour up to your elbows. It itches. Your shoes are softening from the heat. You're convinced you've lost 2 toenails in the past hour alone, but you don't check. There's no time. The pastry line must go on. Suddenly, the master baker hovers behind you and barks, "Decorate that peacock pie." You glance at the unfortunate bird. Cooked, yes. Decapitated, probably. But next to it lies its preserved head and feathers. You're supposed to reattach them. With glue, so it looks alive. You take a moment to quietly whisper an apology to the peacock. You stab toothpicks through its beak and start rebuilding the avian Frankenstein. 1 feather sticks to your forehead. Another drifts into your mouth. It tastes like dust and poultry ghosts. The kitchen bell rings. The pies are ready for plating. You pick up your tray and realize your fingers are trembling again. You breathe through your nose and start the long, sweaty walk toward the serving corridor, pastry coffin in hand. Shoes squelching and dignity somewhere far behind. You don't even make it 3 steps into the pantry before the rat appears. It's not just any rat. This one has been here longer than you. You can see the wisdom in its eyes, the muscle in its haunches, the absolute audacity in the way it waddles across the spice shelf like it owns the place. You freeze mid-step, balancing a tray of pear tarts that somehow smell both sweet and slightly fishy. The rat turns, stares, and without breaking eye contact, topples a small sack of ground nutmeg. Welcome to pantry duty, where dreams and grains go to die. The medieval kitchen pantry isn't shelves of neatly labeled jars and climate-controlled bins. It's a cluttered, dusty tombstone room crammed with sacks, barrels, boxes, dried herbs strung like garlands, and exactly 0 rules about cleanliness. It smells like a confusing mix of cinnamon vinegar, mildew, and something you really hope is cheese. Your job is to inventory the dry stores, spices, grains, flour, dried fruits, and alert the steward if anything is low. Which is hilarious because everything is low, and the steward hasn't looked a single scullion in the eye since Pentecost. You lift a lid on the barrel of almond flour and instantly gag. The top looks fine, but dig an inch deeper, and you find your true enemy, maggots. Plump, wriggling, confident maggots living their best life in your dessert ingredients. You slam the lid back down. No one saw. Problem solved. This is standard, really. In an age with no refrigeration and inconsistent food preservation, infestation is a normal part of kitchen life. That's the mainstream historical fact. Most food in medieval kitchens contained protein of the unintended variety. A whistle from the outer kitchen draws your attention. Someone needs currants. You grab a bag and feel something squishy inside. Spoiler alert, it's not a currant. You tip it into a bowl, and out slides a mold colony so fuzzy it deserves a name and voting rights. As you're trying to scrape the worst of it off with a spoon, the rat returns. Bold, sassy, staring at you as if to say, "I dare you." And that's when the fringe tidbit walks in a mangy kitchen cat with exactly 1 ear and half a tail. The staff call him Brother Geoffrey and swear he was once a monk cursed to live as a cat for sampling communion wine. He lunges at the rat, overshoots, crashes into your leg, and sends you sprawling into a bag of breadcrumbs. The pantry explodes in a cloud of dry dust raisins and ego. You're now wearing half a barrel of oats, and the rat, still untouched, vanishes behind a box of smoked eels. Brother Geoffrey hisses like it's your fault. You start coughing so hard your ribs ache. A passing kitchen maid glances in and mutters, "That'll teach you not to anger the pantry spirits." You blink flour out of your eyes. You're not sure if she was joking. Here's where historians still argue, was the rampant spoilage and infestation truly ignored, or did cooks genuinely believe heavily spiced sauces and long boiling made everything safe to eat? Some suggest they had better instincts than we give credit for. Others argue survival just lowered everyone's standards. Either way, you're 99% sure today's lunch pudding will include some extra protein. Back at your station, you dust yourself off with a bruised apple. It doesn't help. A shout from the spice corner. Someone just discovered a weevil colony in the saffron. That's the expensive stuff. That's noble money. There's panic. People sprint. Someone actually screams. You stay right where you are, nose deep in moldy barley, pretending none of this is happening. The kitchen steward finally enters holding his ledger and looking grim. He sees the maggots in the almond flour, glares at you like you personally raised them, and says one word, salvage. So now you're straining the flour through a cloth, sifting maggots out like some cursed medieval coffee filter. You hum to yourself softly. If you don't pretend it's normal, you'll cry. Eventually the disaster is contained. Sort of. You stack the barrels back up and offer a small prayer to the pantry gods. May they keep the rats distracted, the mold invisible, and Brother Geoffrey in better aim. The next dish you'll be plating is a swan pie, decorated with its own feathers, and set to be garnished with gold-dusted figs. You're not sure if that's dessert or a psychological experiment. But for now, you crouch in a pantry corner, eyeing every sack like it might bite back. The feathers arrive in a damp sack. They smell faintly of pond water and desperation. You drag the bundle to the prep table with a sense of dread settling in your stomach. This isn't your first run-in with an illusion dish, but this one's a special brand of absurd. Tonight's banquet centerpiece is a roasted peacock. Yes, an actual peacock, served whole, and redressed in its own feathers to look alive. Sort of like stuffing grandma and propping her up at dinner. The roasted carcass lies in wait, beak gaping open, charred legs stiff as irony. You're given 2 tasks: make it look majestic, and don't let the feathers fall off into someone's trencher. No pressure. You start by threading stiff wires through the wings, trying to give the impression of lifelike poise. It doesn't help that the skin is paper thin and sloughing off with every touch. Each time you reposition a plume, a new patch of roasted flesh peeks out like a cursed doll with bad taxidermy. Across the table, the master carver watches, arms crossed, radiating judgment. He once sculpted a lard tower shaped like a cathedral. You, on the other hand, are struggling not to glue peacock eyes upside down. This entire concept, meat disguised as living bird, is what nobles call subtlety. A bizarre medieval culinary art where the goal is to astonish, not nourish. Showmanship over flavor. And tonight, you're the magician's assistant trying to reanimate poultry with 0 sleep and a head full of soot. One mainstream historical fact: banquets in elite households often included these elaborate subtleties, from gilded boar heads to entire castles made from marzipan. These dishes weren't always meant to be eaten. They were social theater. You finally manage to reattach the tail feathers into a fanned arc that almost looks intentional. Someone brings over a pot of edible gold leaf paste, which is a fancy way of saying shimmering goo you brush onto food that will immediately be tossed aside. You dab it over the peacock's wings, trying not to laugh at the absurdity of painting a dead bird to look like a Renaissance Barbie. That's when you hear it, an unmistakable hiss from behind a flour sack. You freeze. Brother Geoffrey, the cat, emerges with something wiggling in his mouth. It's unclear if it's a rat or a squirrel. Possibly both. He drops it on your foot like a gift. You offer a dry thank you and return to gold painting your poultry zombie. Suddenly, the kitchen steward barrels in, red-faced and wide-eyed. Who took the rosemary wine jelly? No one answers. He stomps out muttering something about liver paste and incompetence. This isn't your department, but it's everyone's fault until proven otherwise. Someone shoves a tray toward you, 2 more peacocks waiting to be dressed. The meat is stone cold and greasy. You try to slip the skins over like costumes, but they tear in your hands. One has a crooked neck, so you wedge a carved carrot inside to keep it upright. Improvisation, medieval style. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some nobles insisted the peacock's head and neck be stuffed with cotton, soaked in alcohol, then lit on fire as it was carried into the hall. A flaming feathered roast gliding across the floor. Historians still argue whether these dishes were ever meant to be eaten, or just displayed and admired until they cooled into leathery paperweights. By now you've reassembled 3 birds, brushed them in gold, and started on the fruit garnish. It's not fresh fruit, of course. It's pears boiled in wine and cloves until they're the color of blood and the texture of sadness. You perch one next to a peacock's beak like it's whispering secrets. For a brief moment it looks almost dignified. Then the undercook trips, drops a sack of leeks, and sneezes directly onto your masterpiece. You stare at him. He blinks. I'll polish the beak. You gently slide the tray away from him. The final product is wheeled toward the great hall, wobbling slightly on an uneven cart. A hush falls as it enters all glitter and feathers and culinary necromancy. Gasps rise from the guests. Success. Back in the kitchen, you collapse onto a stool. Your arms are streaked with peacock grease. Your hands shimmer faintly with gold, and your sanity is held together by 2 singed tail feathers and a thread of hope that no one asks for another one. You wouldn't last a meal in here. The silence doesn't last. Just when you think the worst is behind you, a bell rings. Not a pleasant dinner bell. This one is sharp, urgent, and full of dread. It means you're up. The serving phase has begun. You scramble to grab the trays, still slick with oil and panic. The kitchen is a storm of elbows and shouting, and the only rule seems to be don't drop anything on the Lord's boots, or your head becomes dinner tomorrow. You balance an enormous trencher of boar meat carved to resemble a rose, though it looks more like a meat accident alongside a tureen of gravy, as thick as tar and twice as hot. You're sweating in places you didn't know could sweat. Your woolen tunic clings to your spine. You take one step toward the door and remember too late that the flagstones are slick with suet from earlier. Your foot flies. Time slows. The gravy boat sails majestically through the air, rotates mid-flight like a tragic comet, and then splashes directly onto the shoe of a particularly important-looking noblewoman. She gasps. You freeze. Everyone stares. You say nothing. A dog takes the opportunity to lick her ankle. You consider joining him just to deflect attention. From the dais, the steward raises an eyebrow. The kitchen master groans somewhere behind you. You know what this means. No more food delivery for you. No more pastry station. No more peacock assembly. You're demoted to dung duty. Yes, dung duty. You've barely caught your breath before a mop is thrust into your hands, and you're pointed toward the alley behind the hall where guests occasionally relieve themselves. Banquet wine works fast. You're now the guardian of medieval sanitation, scraping dowsing, and trying not to cry in public. Mainstream fact. Even in grand feasting halls, basic sanitation was an afterthought. Chamber pots' overflowed refuse was dumped into open gutters, and guests routinely tossed bones onto the floor. Cleaning up wasn't glamorous. It was barely human. As you mop under a bench, still sticky from spilled ale, you hear laughter from the great hall. You can smell roasted apples and clove pudding wafting out the door, neither of which you'll get to taste. You can also hear the faint clink of coins being exchanged, as guests bet on whether the juggler will set his beard on fire again. Then someone calls for more trenchers, those flat loaves of stale bread used as medieval plates. You're tasked with collecting the old ones now, soggy with meat juices and fish bones, and replacing them with new clean ones. Spoiler, they're just yesterday's bread. Historians still argue whether these trenchers were actually eaten afterward by the poor, or tossed to dogs. Tonight you're not sure either group would want them. You grab a bucket and begin your route table to table, scooping up half-eaten mutton and sticky raisins into what used to be a soup pot. A child throws a fig at your head. A noble sloshes wine down your sleeve. Someone calls you bread goblin. You accept it. It's fair. And here's your quirky tidbit to end the night. Some medieval feasts ended with a dish called a subtlety that spoke. Literally hidden bellows or mechanical parts would make a cooked bird or creature croak or whistle. The guests would cheer, laugh, and then often eat it anyway. Nothing says appetite like a shrieking pie. Back in the kitchen, the fire's dying down. You slink in with your bucket of mush and dump it into the slop trough. Your feet ache. Your back might never straighten again, and the peacock feathers stuck to your elbow won't come off no matter how hard you scrub. The master cook pats your shoulder. You didn't ruin everything he says. Just most of it. A compliment, really. You curl up on a sack of turnips using a dish rag as a pillow. Tomorrow it starts again before sunrise with smoke in your lungs, rat droppings underfoot, and eel slime in your fingernails. But for now you rest. You wouldn't last a meal in this kitchen, but somehow you did. And now, as the fire crackles into embers and the scent of roasted meat fades into memory, you let your limbs go heavy. The clatter of trenchers and clamor of nobles slip behind you like distant thunder. You've survived the worst, a medieval banquet kitchen at full tilt, and lived to tell the tale, gravy stains and all. Let your breath slow. The grease in your hair, the soot in your lungs, even the ghost of that glaring peacock, they all begin to melt away, replaced by cool air and soft quiet. The floor beneath you steadies, and the frantic noise softens into a warm, velvety hush. Tomorrow you'll wake far from the scullery, safe and clean. But for now, stay just a little longer in the afterglow of chaos, because even history's messiest corners can lull us to sleep. Sweet dreams. Hey guys, tonight we travel back to a time when you didn't just worry about your taxes or your neighbor's noisy goats, you worried your pig might get dragged into court for murder. That's not a joke. You could be called to stand trial because your sow got a little too bitey near the wrong child, and suddenly you're not just a pig owner, you're a co-defendant. The floor of the courtroom packed with hay, the accused four-legged snout, and a less than innocent oink. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know your location and what time it is where you're tuning in from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It starts with a knock, not a friendly one. The kind of knock that makes your stomach flip over because nobody good knocks like that at dawn. You creak open the door, still groggy from trying to sleep off last night's too warm mead, and there's a man in a robe holding a scroll. Not a priest. Worse, a bailiff. He reads the scroll aloud as if you're illiterate. To be fair, you are. Your pig, yes, your actual pig, is charged with murder. Of a child. Of the Lord's child. And you are summoned to appear in court. With her. To stand trial. You stand there, barefoot, breath fogging, blinking like a stunned ox. The pig is dozing in the straw behind you, completely unaware she's been accused of homicide. She blinks back at you with the utter serenity of someone who has never been legally accountable for anything. You, on the other hand, feel your stomach begin to cramp. Medieval Europe isn't exactly known for its sanity. But this is new even for you. You're vaguely aware that this isn't the first time it's happened. Word in the tavern last year was that a rooster got burned at the stake for laying an egg, which apparently meant it was possessed. Historians still argue whether these proceedings were more symbolic or truly believed to dispense justice, but either way, it's now your problem. You try to reason with the bailiff. She's just a pig, you say. She didn't mean to. He shrugs. Intent is for the court to decide. He hands you a second scroll, a fine of course, for blood spilled, payable whether she's found guilty or not. Standard stuff. You slump down on the bench outside your cottage. What does a pig trial even look like? Do you shave her? Do you teach her not to grunt during testimony? Your neighbors are already whispering, not just about the pig, but about you. Why did the pig attack the child? They wonder pigs don't just do that, unless they're hungry, or provoked, or cursed. You don't sleep that night. The pig, as usual, snores like a sawmill. You lie awake, imagining the gallows they'll build for her. You heard about that too. Full executions sometimes dressed in tiny clothes to match the humans they'd supposedly wronged. Because dignity apparently doesn't apply when your defendant has a curly tail. There's an old man in the next village who says he once saw a goat wear shackles for a trial. Said it didn't go well. For the goat, or the man who owned it. The town priest claimed the animal had the devil's gaze. That's not exactly a scientific method, but this is a world where eclipses are witchcraft, and black cats are trial bait. Morning comes too soon. The air smells like damp ash and anxious sweat. You pull on your one decent tunic, patched, but at least mostly clean, and start brushing bits of straw out of the pig's bristly coat. She snorts indignantly, like this is the worst indignity she's ever known. The road to town is muddy slick with last night's rain. Every squelching step feels like a countdown. People watch from behind half-closed shutters. Some make the sign of the cross. One boy throws a pebble. You're no longer just that pig farmer. You're now that guy with the accused pig. By the time the courthouse, or what passes for one, looms into view, you feel more like a suspect than a citizen. The pig oinks once sniffs the air and continues walking beside you, utterly unbothered. You, however, are one scroll away from social annihilation, or worse, execution by association. The courthouse smells like damp wood sweat and something unsettlingly close to bacon. Not a good omen. You half expect to be turned away at the door. Surely there's been a mistake, a prank something. But no. The bailiff from yesterday nods, looks down at your pig like she's tracking mud into a cathedral, and waves you through. Inside, it's chaos wrapped in ceremony. Candles sputter in iron sconces. A man in a velvet cap bickers loudly with a monk. Someone is shouting about property damage. And in the middle of it all, a pen. Not a metaphorical one. A literal wooden pig pen in the corner of the courtroom. You're instructed very seriously to place your pig inside the enclosure. She waddles in with a grunt, flops down on her haunches, and promptly starts chewing on a discarded turnip rind. Meanwhile, a scribe dips his quill and records her entrance. Yes, really. You're then informed that as the pig's owner, you're responsible for securing legal representation. For her, not for you. You're just her handler, not the accused yet. That distinction is precarious. A lawyer approaches. He's dressed in fur, despite the sweltering room, and his eyes gleam with the kind of opportunism usually reserved for eel vendors. He offers his services for a fee that's just a hair less than your entire spring harvest. You try to haggle. He sighs and throws in limited exorcism services for free. The paperwork is bizarre. There's an actual document detailing the pig's alleged crime murder with malicious intent. Apparently she bit a toddler during a festival, and the child died days later of unclean humors. There's no mention of disease or hygiene, or the fact that pigs are known to bite when cornered. Just that she acted with fury unbefitting a beast. Historians still debate whether these trials were symbolic scapegoating, or a reflection of genuine medieval belief in animal culpability. Either way, you're here, and she's in a pen awaiting trial. You're told to prepare a statement. Not for yourself, of course. For her. Your lawyer, bless him, has a scroll of prepared arguments dating back to an ox that crushed a bishop's foot in 1321. He recommends you claim your pig was provoked by unruly children, lacked demonic possession, and bore no prior record of violence. He also suggests you dress her up. It helps the jury empathize, he says. You blink. He pulls out a small bonnet and a rough-spun cloak. Your pig looks like a nun's bad dream. You bite your tongue as someone nearby chuckles. Court begins with loud banging, and the appearance of the magistrate, a portly man, whose powdered wig is slowly sliding off to one side. He scans the room, squints at the pig, and announces the case. The town of Saint-Martin versus Agnès the sow. You feel like your brain is melting. The clerk reads aloud the charges with great ceremony. Each time the pig's name is mentioned, there's a pause for the courtroom to absorb the seriousness of the accusation. Your pig, oblivious, tries to bite the bars of her pen. The clerk frowns. Mark her behavior, he mutters to the scribe. Belligerent. Next, the lawyer beside you stands and introduces himself on behalf of the accused. He bows deeply to the magistrate, nods to the crowd, and begins with a reference to Leviticus, followed by a long quote from Roman law. You recognize none of it, but you nod along, hoping it makes you seem appropriately reverent. The pig scratches her side. The crowd titters. The judge raises a hand for silence, But it's too late. She has somehow upstaged your entire defense with a dramatic flop onto her side. Your lawyer presses on. He references precedent, a pit from Dijon, where a donkey was acquitted after character witnesses claimed it performed daily devotions with great humility. Another trial in 1386 saw a pig dressed in human clothes and hanged after biting off a child's face. We seek a better outcome, he declares. Meanwhile, you're panicking. Not because of the outcome, but because you forgot to bring the offering you were told would ease the court's mood. A basket of bread, maybe. Some wine. A soft bribe disguised as hospitality. You whisper to your lawyer. He sighs and tosses a small wedge of cheese toward the clerk. The clerk catches it and nods. Consider it noted, he says. You glance over at your pig. She's now asleep, one hind leg twitching. If this weren't your life, it would be hilarious. But it is your life. And somehow this farce has only just begun. The pig stirs awake as the judge calls the first witness. You barely recognize the man who steps forward, older now, with thinning hair and hands that tremble slightly. But his voice is loud and sure, a former festival vendor with a flair for storytelling. He recounts in elaborate detail the events of that fateful St. Bartholomew's Day. Your pig, he insists, lunged at the toddler without warning, eyes wild foam at the mouth, a shriek like Lucifer's own kettle boiling. You blink. The pig beside you grunts softly and begins chewing on her own tail. Dramatic, yes, but demonic. Probably not. The man continues. He swears your pig paused to look back at the crowd as if to say, "I'll do it again." Murmurs ripple through the audience. One woman clutches a rosary. Another whispers about omens. Your lawyer raises a finger. Objection, anthropomorphism. The judge squints. Speak Latin in this courtroom, or hold your tongue. You stifle a cough. A pig trial, yes. But heaven forbid anyone say objection in the vernacular. The second witness is the child's mother. She's thin pale, and clearly still grieving. She claims the child had merely reached to pet the pig, and that the animal seemed possessed. She crosses herself. The court collectively gasps. It's a powerful moment, and a devastating blow to your case. Your lawyer stands and launches into damage control. It's not uncommon, he says, for animals to reflect the emotional states of those around them. Perhaps the pig was frightened by the noise by the crowd, by the smells of roasted meat and spilled wine. Who among us has not made regrettable decisions under stress? A few sympathetic nods. A man in the corner yawns. The pig lets out a loud fart. Perfect timing. Then comes the priest. His robes smell of incense and something sharper, maybe anise. He holds a small book of rites and a pouch of holy salt. There was no time, he says solemnly, for full exorcism rites. But I performed a basic blessing, and the pig responded. Poorly. He frowns. It squealed during the recitation of the Lord's Prayer. Twice. Pigs squeal constantly, your lawyer counters, especially when forced to sit still in courtrooms. The priest raises an eyebrow. And yet she went silent the moment I said, "In nomine Patris." Coincidence. Historians still argue whether priests of the 14th and 15th centuries truly believed animals could be possessed, or whether their involvement was more ceremonial, an attempt to reassure a frightened public that cosmic order was being restored. Regardless, your pig is not helping her case. She's now chewing on her own enclosure, which creaks ominously. The judge leans forward. Do you have any character witnesses? You blink. For a pig. Your lawyer nods. Yes, the baker's apprentice. A teenage boy steps forward. He's nervously clutching his cap, eyes darting. She was always nice to me, he says. Sometimes followed me around when I had grain in my pockets, he adds hesitantly. And once I saw her nudge a cart out of a ditch. With her head. There's silence. Then laughter. Even the judge chuckles. A heroic pig, he muses. Perhaps we've misjudged her. You try not to look too hopeful. The crowd settles as the judge signals the end of testimony for the day. Court will resume tomorrow with final arguments. As you prepare to leave, the bailiff warns you. Make sure she doesn't escape. If she flees justice, the punishment will fall on you. Outside, dusk hangs heavy. Your pig trots beside you on a hempen leash, indifferent to the growing crowd of villagers watching. Some glare. Others whisper. A few children point and giggle. You hear someone mutter, "That's the one who feeds demons." You glance back at your pig. She pauses, snorts loudly, and relieves herself in the middle of the cobblestone street. You sigh. You remember what your grandmother once said. If the saints won't save you, at least make them laugh. Well, if laughter counts for anything, maybe tomorrow won't be a total disaster. You wake up sore from the straw mattress, the pig snoring blissfully in her borrowed pen behind the inn. A quick breakfast of stale rye and tepid ale does little to settle your stomach. Today is the final stretch, the moment when logic, scripture, and courtroom theatrics all collide in a glorious farce masquerading as justice. Back in the courtroom, it's even more crowded than yesterday. Word has spread. Someone's brought pastries. A juggler loiters by the door. The town hasn't seen this much excitement since that goose trial last winter. It was acquitted, by the way. The goose. Somehow. The judge clears his throat. Your lawyer rises dramatically, parchment in hand, and begins his closing argument. He launches into a monologue that attempts to cover all legal bases: intent, culpability, divine will, and pig psychology. You suspect he's mostly performing for the ladies in the back row. He argues that your pig lacks mens rea, the criminal mind. That while the act may have been tragic, there is no evidence she possessed murderous intent. He even cites St. Thomas Aquinas, who once pondered whether animals had souls, but concluded they lacked the reason necessary for sin. The judge raises an eyebrow. And yet she bit a child's throat clean through. Your lawyer doesn't flinch. So do wolves. Shall we put the forest on trial? He has a point. Wolves don't usually get defense attorneys, or dressed in borrowed vestments to shame them properly, as was done to a donkey once in 1386. That donkey had been accused of indecent behavior with a farmhand. Historians still argue whether that trial was earnest or some elaborate moral performance for the town's youth. The prosecution rises. Their argument is shorter, angrier, and filled with appeals to the crowd's fear. If we let this animal walk next what chickens voting horses in the taverns. The audience erupts with laughter. And then the sentence. You're told to stand. The pig, still wearing a ribbon, someone tied around her left ear, blinks up at the judge with perfect oblivion. The town clerk reads the verdict aloud, solemn as a monk. Guilty. The pig is to be hanged by the neck until dead, publicly in the town square. The execution will be carried out by the municipal hangman, and you, as the owner, are expected to pay for the rope, the scaffolding repair, the burial pit, and a modest lunch for the magistrate. You want to protest. You open your mouth. Nothing comes out. The pig burps. Execution is set for noon tomorrow. The judge bangs his gavel once. The courtroom disperses into hushed chatter, people already arguing over the best viewing spots. You and your pig are escorted out with guards, ensuring no flight from justice. One of them eyes you with suspicion. You sure she wasn't bewitched? He mutters. She's got clever eyes. You look down. Your pig is chewing on his shoe. Back at the inn, you stare into your bowl of turnip stew. The pig slurps happily from her trough, utterly unaware of her fate. You envy her in a way. Then the hangman stops by, casual as a neighbor delivering soup. Sorry about all this, he says. Not personal. You want the extra organs back after sometimes folks use them for broth. You decline. Sleep doesn't come easy. Every sound outside, every squeak of a wagon wheel or bark of a dog sets your nerves aflame. You imagine the gallows being hammered together plank by plank, your pig being led up wooden steps, the crowd cheering as if they'd just seen a miracle. You also imagine her escaping, breaking free, running wild into the forest, joining a pack of outlaw pigs, starting a revolution. But she's still here, curled up like a sack of grain, dreaming of whatever pigs dream of. Probably turnips. In the corner, your lawyer counts his fee completely unfazed. You whisper to the pig, I tried. She snorts. Outside, the church bell tolls midnight. 12 hours until your pig makes history, or at least becomes a minor footnote in the oddest chapter of medieval jurisprudence. You don't even have time to say goodbye properly. At the crack of dawn, guards arrive to escort your pig to the square, treating her with all the dignity due to a condemned criminal. You walk behind her slowly, barely able to keep your feet moving. She waddles without protest, occasionally distracted by a cabbage leaf fluttering on the wind. The gallows have been prepared with stunning speed and enthusiasm. Bunting hangs from nearby windows. Children sit on their parents' shoulders. A cart sells spiced cider and roasted chestnuts. One clever merchant is hawking miniature nooses made of licorice. The pig's rope is already looped, dangling ominously above the scaffold. A priest approaches, incense swinging, chanting a prayer that's half Latin, half theatrical flair. The crowd quiets. But wait, your lawyer raises a finger. One final appeal, he shouts dramatically. The judge, who looks more interested in his roasted chestnut cone than justice, sighs. Very well, but make it quick. You step forward. Your heart pounds in your ears. The wind catches your cloak. Your voice trembles, but you speak anyway. She didn't mean to do it. A few in the crowd chuckle. A child mimics oinking sounds. She's not a monster, you continue. She didn't ask to live in a town that chains pigs to trees and feeds children unsupervised. She didn't choose to be born. We brought her here, trained her to eat scraps and waste, then blamed her for doing exactly what we taught. Your lawyer nods approvingly. A goose in the crowd honks. Animals don't have malice, you say. They have instincts, reactions, hunger, maybe confusion, but not evil. That's our invention. The priest snorts. And yet she bit the child in the face. You shrug helplessly. So did my cousin once. No trial for him. A ripple of uncomfortable laughter. It's a flimsy argument. You know it. Everyone knows it. But something in your words seems to strike a chord. The judge squints thoughtfully. The hangman pauses, scratching his beard. The bishop leans forward. And what do you suggest instead? Penance, a fast. Your lawyer whispers urgently. This might be our last shot. Go big. You swallow hard. Let her be exiled. Into the forest. Banish her. That way she's punished but lives. Isn't mercy a virtue? The crowd murmurs. Some nod. Others jeer. One man throws a beat. The judge raises a hand. Silence falls. Historians still argue whether these trials were meant for justice or simply to keep the social order, he says. But today we shall lean toward mercy. Not for the pig, but for your speech. You can barely believe your ears. Banishment, he declares. She is to be marked, then set free beyond the edge of town. May the woods deal with her as they please. There's applause. Disappointment. One particularly angry woman throws her chestnut cone at the judge's head. But it's done. You and your pig, who has no idea how close she came to becoming stew meat, are led to the outskirts. A branding iron singes her ear with a mark to show she's been condemned. She squeals, then promptly tries to eat a dandelion. And just like that, she disappears into the tree line. You watch the underbrush shake as she vanishes. It's over. Well, sort of. Back in town, the gossip has already started. The woman whose son was bitten claims you bewitched the pig. Others whisper you made a secret deal with the devil for her to be spared. Someone starts a rumor that you kissed her snout and chanted Latin under the full moon. By the time you get back to the inn, your room has been ransacked. You're no longer just the owner of a killer pig. Now you're a suspected sorcerer. You collapse on your straw mattress. Your lawyer pokes his head in, munching on roasted chestnuts. Told you she had character, he says. You ever think about hiring me again, say for your own trial? I offer a loyal client discount. You stare at the ceiling. Maybe you should have let them hang the pig. You wake up to someone pounding at the door, like they're trying to arrest you with their fists. Which, given you're weak, wouldn't be that surprising. Turns out they're not after you yet. They're here to collect payment for the pig's trial. That's right. You're being billed. The parchment lists everything in scribbled ink: court processing fee, witness transportation, ecclesiastical blessing, surcharge, gallows maintenance, and this one's circled emotional distress caused to the community. Total cost, more than a small cottage. You stare at it in disbelief. She wasn't even executed. The clerk shrugs. Hanging or banishment, the gallows crew showed up. Someone's got to pay for the rope, even if it went unused. You contemplate hurling the invoice into the fire. Instead, you give him your last silver coin and slam the door. Your lawyer, who started sleeping on your floor and stealing your bread, nods. The justice system, my friend. It's a banquet for everyone, except you. Word of the pig's escape spreads like mold in a monastery. The village square is buzzing again, but this time with rumors about her whereabouts. Some claim she's been spotted in the forest leading a band of outlaw animals. Others say she joined a convent of pigs who renounce mud and eat only cabbage. Someone even sketches her likeness onto a wanted poster, complete with the phrase, "Swine of the devil." A child sticks it to the tavern door. And just when you think it can't get any weirder, the trial of another creature begins, this time a rooster. Yes, a rooster. He stands accused of laying an egg. This is a problem because in medieval lore, if a male bird lays an egg, it must be a cockatrice, a mythical monster capable of killing with a glance. Or worse, it's possessed by Satan himself. You find yourself in the gallery munching stale bread as you watch the spectacle unfold. The rooster is perched in a little basket looking utterly unbothered by the crowd. His owner pleads that the egg was just a pebble, but the monks insist it was warm and trembled with unholy power. A bishop leans forward dramatically. Historians still argue whether these trials were symbolic, sincere, or just bizarre entertainment, but clearly this one's possessed. The verdict: burn the egg, banish the rooster, roast him if he comes back. It's like your pig's trial all over again, just with more feathers and less guilt. As the weeks pass, you hear of more cases. A group of termites is excommunicated for destroying a church roof. A swarm of locusts is issued a formal eviction notice by a bishop. A she-goat is tried for stealing cheese from herself. Each time the courtroom fills, bets are placed, prayers are muttered, and the defendants either die horribly or vanish into the forest like your pig. And somehow every time someone profits, usually not you. Back at the inn, your landlord hikes the rent. Says you've attracted dark omens. Your beer arrives watered down. The local blacksmith now spits whenever you walk by. You're officially the pig whisperer. You try to keep a low profile, but it doesn't help when your lawyer starts telling dramatic tales about your trial in exchange for drinks. You should have seen it. He slurs one night. This man stared down the bishop himself. For a pig with dignity, you bury your face in your hands. Fame, it turns out, is overrated, especially when it comes from livestock litigation. And yet something's shifting in you. A strange blend of annoyance and purpose. Because if pigs, roosters, and termites are being judged in courts meant for humans, what does that say about humanity? One evening, a traveling scholar stops you in the market. She's heard the story. Wants to write a pamphlet about the absurdity of animal trials. Do you think the pig knew she was on trial? She asks. You pause. Honestly, I think she just wanted a turnip. She nods. Exactly, that's the tragedy of it. For the first time in weeks, you laugh. A real one. And for a moment, it almost feels like justice. You can't help but wonder, was your pig's trial truly the strangest thing to happen in court? Turns out not even close. Word reaches your ears of a donkey once dragged into a French courtroom for singing during Sunday Mass. Not braying singing. The priest swore it mocked the hymns. Townsfolk argued the notes were in tune. The donkey was acquitted, but only after a heated debate about musical intention. Then there's the trial of the rats in autumn France. They were accused of destroying barley crops. The court summoned the entire rat population to appear within 8 days. When the rats failed to show their lawyer yes, they had one argued the summons wasn't fair because the roads were dangerous. Cats, dogs, pitchforks, an entire gauntlet of hazards. The court actually accepted the delay. Historians still argue whether this reflects medieval obsession with justice, elaborate symbolism, or just deep-rooted boredom. But one thing's clear, people really took their vermin to court. You flip through old court records in a dusty archive room, helped by a monk with a lazy eye and a love for drama. One document describes a swarm of weevils excommunicated from vineyards. Another, more bizarre, still tells of a rooster in Switzerland burned at the stake for laying a suspected basilisk egg. Repeat offender, the monk whispers, like it's a known criminal. In one Italian case, a colony of moles was warned in writing to leave a monastery garden or face damnation. 3 days later, the monks claimed the moles had obeyed. You suspect a spade was involved. What really catches your attention, though, is a curious footnote. A dancing bear once called as a witness in a trial involving a tavern brawl. The bear was made to nod in response to yes or no questions. You try not to imagine how those responses were encouraged. The weirdness doesn't end with animals either. Inanimate objects weren't safe. A murder weapon, a dagger, was once sentenced to exile. A bell that rang without being struck was deemed possessed and buried in consecrated ground. One particularly gossipy painting was locked in a chest for giving suspicious glances during prayer. So when you think about your pig, you realize she's just one in a long, strange parade of beings, caught in the absurd machinery of justice. Back in town, a traveling bard starts performing a satirical song called The Porcine Defendant. It's got a catchy lute line and a chorus that includes the phrase, "Oink if you're guilty." Children love it. You less so. You go to the market, and someone's carved tiny wooden pigs with blindfolds like Lady Justice. Your lawyer's selling them for a few pence each. You say nothing. He shrugs. Gotta fund the next trial somehow. What gets under your skin most is how normal it's all become. No one questions the logic. Not the priest who sprinkles holy water on weevil-infested fields. Not the judge who lectures barn owls on their moral duty. Not even you, really. You start writing it all down, mostly to keep from screaming. Each absurd case, each impossible verdict. The monk agrees to copy your notes onto parchment, says it could be the next book of hours, only smellier. And still your pig remains at large. Some say she crossed the river into another province. Others whisper she was taken in by a nunnery and wears a little veil. A few swear she's working as a kitchen assistant in a monastery, stirring porridge with her snout. You like that last one. You imagine her there, snorting gently as she pushes barley around a pot, completely unaware of the legal chaos she caused. Or maybe not unaware. Maybe deep down she knew exactly what she was doing. And maybe, just maybe, she got away with it. At first, it's just a few murmurs in the tavern. Nothing louder than the clink of a tankard or the creak of an old stool. Someone leans a bit too close and asks if it's true you taught your pig Latin. Another swears they saw you muttering charms over the trough. Soon enough, it isn't just gossip. It's an accusation. You, the pig owner, are now the suspect. Not of theft or murder, no, something far worse in the eyes of medieval law sorcery. You feel the shift before the words are spoken. The priest, the same one who tried to banish demons from your pig, now eyes you like a corrupted scroll. The village elder's smile has vanished. Even your neighbor, the one who once borrowed onions weekly, avoids your gaze like your shadow's contagious. Historians still argue whether these trials were born out of genuine belief or a need to scapegoat someone, anyone, when the world didn't make sense. Plague must be the rats. Crop failure, clearly a mole conspiracy. Bad luck, probably witchcraft. Probably you. You're summoned to court. Not just any court. This one has torches. And a pit. You aren't even sure what the pit is for, but it looks ominously empty. The judge, puffed up like an overstuffed goose, reads from a long parchment. You're accused of pacting with infernal forces via a porcine vessel. You try not to laugh, but you also try not to cry. Both feel equally dangerous. The prosecutor claims your pig responded to secret whistles, that she bowed before altars and blinked at demons. He brings out a child, barely 5, who says your pig talked, with a surprisingly good vocabulary. The crowd gasps. The child is given bread and honey. To your horror, your own lawyer returns, the same one who failed to save your pig. He mumbles something about this being unprecedented, but not entirely unfamiliar, and then accidentally refers to you as the accused sow, before correcting himself. You begin to realize you might not be walking away from this one. Frantically, you mount a defense. You argue pigs are intelligent. You say she simply mirrored human behavior. You quote Aristotle. You beg. You promise free bacon to the town for a year. But their minds are made up. And then comes the unexpected, a stay of judgment. A royal messenger, huffing and sweating, arrives from the city. Apparently the crown has received word of the pig's trial, and now yours, and declared it all to be legally embarrassing. The letter is written on fine vellum, sealed with a wax stamp, and reads in part, "What in God's name are you people doing?" The judge coughs. The torches are extinguished. The crowd disperses. Just like that, your life is no longer in danger. But nothing goes back to normal. You're not imprisoned, but you're not welcome either. You walk through town, and people move aside. The baker avoids eye contact. Children follow at a distance, daring each other to touch your shadow. You've become a story, a warning, a footnote. Still, you find some peace in exile. You leave the village with a satchel of cheese, a map with smudged ink, and a faint hope that somewhere someone might treat animal trials as the absurdities they are. And perhaps, just perhaps, you'll find your pig. Maybe she's grazing in peace. Maybe she's been adopted by a kindly goat herder. Maybe she's become a legend of her own. You like to imagine her looking up at the stars, snout twitching in the moonlight, remembering the trial, the crowds, the stage, and smiling. So now, with the court adjourned and the last gavel echoing into silence, let's gently leave behind those torchlit chambers and return to the stillness of our own quiet rooms. Let the absurdity fade like a dream, a trial where pigs were criminals and beetles were banished like villains. The world of the past, so bizarre, so full of conviction and contradiction, slowly dissolves into the soft hush of sleep. Breathe deeply, let your thoughts settle, and picture a sleepy pig nestled in straw, free at last, far from courtrooms and creeping suspicion. You're safe now, far from absurd accusations and wooden tribunals. Just starlight, quiet air, and the soft turning of time. Sweet dreams.